Let's learn. Kumlana Black Gemara, we are up to Daf Tes Amid Aleph. And we started with Rabbi Lozer came along and he said that even if somebody's claim was not regarding that there was no dam, because remember, dam can be verified. They used to put a piece of linen there to see whether there was any blood there or not. But he comes along and claims Pesach Masuach. I found that there was no hymen there. That can never be verified, especially if she denies it. Anyway, so he comes along and says Pesach Masuach Matzasi. So he came to Rabbi Lozer says that we have a concept called Shavya Nafshi Chaticha Desur. If you decided, you deem that it's asur, then for you have to behave as if it's asur. They can no longer live together, and that's a chiddush because could be he's making a mistake. So of course he's saying it so he's saying with such certainty, then that you have to behave that way. And as far as she's concerned, it doesn't work that way. But as far as he's concerned, she was a pesach b'suach, and therefore he's assuming that she had some kind of affair before. And then we said this only impacts a wife of a kohen because there's only one suffix there, because whether it was done deliberately or whether it was done coercion makes no difference. Or she got engaged before she was 3 years old, and now she's already an adult, and there's no question that it happened before 3 because the hymen would have grown back. It's rather a question of was it baratzon or ba'inus. But any other woman, she doesn't become asa at all. And the next part of it is where Rashi learns, even though as far as he's concerned, he can't live with her, but she does not in any way forfeit her ksuvah. Because that we don't believe. That's how Rashi learns. Taisus later on disagrees. He says she doesn't lose her ksuvah. We'll see why. Okay, so then we ask if that's the whole chiddush shavi nafshi. We learned already elsewhere that if a person says I was married to you, he's also to live with all of her relatives and so on. So we said no, that's not a chiddush because over there he knows if he got married to her or not. And if he says he did, then as far as he's concerned, he is forbidden to all of her relatives. But over here, it could be he's making a mistake. Well, he's suddenly expert, or suddenly he knows that he did tear the hymen, he didn't, and so therefore we wouldn't have known. In this case, he says shavi nafshi. Kamashlam we do. So we're up to the Gemara here, right in the middle of the page of Tesam and Aleph. Says the Gemara, "Umi amar Rabbi Lozer hochi." Did Rabbi Lozer actually say that? Did Rabbi Lozer actually say that? Amar Rabbi Lozer said. Did he say that a husband can basically answer his wife by saying Pesach B'suach? Rabbi Lozer said, "Eina isha says about a woman's not become answer to her husband. Elal is kekida v'stira." Only if he warned her beforehand, and then afterwards, stira, she was in seclusion with this person. Then he will learn all about this later. And ukemaisa shahaya, the story of David Hamelech and Bathsheba, Uriah Hitti was at the front in the war, and David Hamelech then had his affair with Bathsheba. And then when he came back, he sent Uriah back to the war again, where he died. Now, so that's the Gemara asking. Before the Gemara has a chance to finish, the Gemara right away jumps and says, "What are you talking about? What does it mean, kina v'stira, and like the story with David and Bathsheba? Where was the kina? You think Uriah had a clue, an inkling what was happening to David Melech and his wife? What do you mean, like the story of David? Was there kina there? Was there a warning from Uriah to his wife? Was she, and so on? That's question number one. But furthermore, mi asrua. In fact, did she become asr on Uriah? The din is if she would have become asr on Uriah Hachiti, then she'd be also asr David Melech. We have a rule: echad lebal, echad lebal. If she's asr to the husband, she's also asr to the boil, to the one that she had the affair with. And it wasn't so because David Melech actually married her legally. So what's Rabbi Lozer saying? So Gemara first explained Rabbi Lozer. This is what Rabbi Lozer meant to say. But this is let's paraphrase what he's saying. Eina isha nesedes abayla. When is a woman forbidden to husband? Ella only al izke kida v'stira. Only if there's a warning. And how do we know that? Not like the story, but from the story. Because there David Melech was permitted to her. Why was David Melech permitted to her? Because there was no warning there. So that proves, he said, well, says the only time that the husband's forbidden to live with his wife is if there was a warning and there was stira. Mim ma'isa shahaya de lo havi kina v'stira, and lo yitza taka didn't become asr. Says the Gemara, become welcome kasha. I still have a problem. But Rabbi Lozer here says the only way that a woman becomes asr to her husband is if there was a warning between them, kina v'stira. But Pesach B'suach, he wakes up one morning, he says right in the beginning that I found that there was no hymen, the Pesach B'suach. That isn't an excuse. That isn't a reason to asr him. How can Rabbi Lozer here now in the Gemara say that Pesach B'suach is believed to asr? Says the Gemara back. Let's say you're right. Does it make sense what you said? What happens if 2 witnesses come along and say, we saw that your wife committed adultery? She's not asr the husband, but there's no warning. There was no stira, kineva stira. It doesn't matter. If we know for sure that there was a two Adim, then it's asa. So the time Gemara goes back. Kineva stira in Adim loy. Adim don't work. Of course it does work. So why can't it be other things like Pesach Pesuach? Says the Gemara. And we know that Adim, the Torah always says there's an Adim. If you matzav eres dover, then a person should write against his wife, and so on. Ella hachikamar. This is what Rabbi Loza said. If there's only a single aid, she does not become asa to husband unless there was kinei v'stira. That's what he meant to say. The only case where there's one aid and she's asa is if first he gave her a warning and stira, and then the aid comes along and says, "El b'shnei aidim." It was a woman that come asa al el b'shnei aidim, only with two aidim. The kinei v'stira. The exception is if there was kinei v'stira, I feel even one aid nami. And the Pesach Pesuach is named on me. And Pesach Pesuach is just like there were two Eidim. That's and that's what I'm saying here. That Pesach Pesuach, if he's convinced that he found that the Pesach was Pesuach, it's such it is so compelling. It's just like there were two witnesses there. She must have had an affair beforehand. You're gonna ask me you're gonna ask me Ma'aseh Shehoya. What about the story of David HaMelech over there? White taka was an Osir. There were Eidim there. Rashes. What do you mean there were Eidim there? Because everyone knew about it. Rashes Eidim Harber. There were many Eidim over there. Everyone knew about it. Yeah. What do you mean everyone knew about it? The Taser doesn't understand. What do you mean? The fact is, there were no Eidim that saw them commit adultery. They saw them might seem together in the house. But nobody saw adultery. So what's the more question? In Tamer by Bathsheba, it means that since you're telling me that Pesach Pesuach, in other words, if the husband knows there's a problem for him, it's us. David knew that he was a problem. David knew that he was living with Bathsheba, was a married woman. So it should have been us. Not because they were Eidim, but you've introduced the idea that Pesach Pesuach, which means even though I know there's no Eidim, but if I know that there's a problem, I have to behave as if there's a problem. If a person saw his wife commit adultery, there were no Eidim. He's not allowed to live with her anymore because he knows. So therefore, Dorimau should not live with Bathsheba. That's the question. How did he go back to Bathsheba? And in fact, the American Babatzi and Hazov over there, that they were making fun of him, that, and Dorimau said, he called it a Suffolk Hadish. Is much better than being mal mechaber berabim, which is tantamount to murder. So how did he live with her? So the Gemara, two answers. Hossam over there, Oines who, very interesting answer. She had no brain, right? When the king says it comes over, she has no choice, no alternative. So because she was an Oines, in fact, we're going to had been certain very young, 6 years old. So because she had no brain in it, she was coerced. So if she's coerced, she's mutter to husband. And the din is, when is it asa to the adulterer? Only if she becomes asa to the husband. Echad lebal, echad leboil. But over here, and since this case, she's not asa to the husband because she was forced into this situation, nor is she asa to the boil. And that's why David Melech was able to live with her. That's one answer, which seems to say David Melech really did the wrong thing, but there's no Issa. However, the second answer is, as the Gemara in Shabbos we had, Kol Mishama David Chayte Ein Elatoya. Whoever said David sin is making a mistake. What do you mean? What about Bathsheba? The boy said, Kol Hayetzil Mechemes Beis David. Anyone who went out to the war of Beis David, get krisis kaisul ishtay. He writes a get krisis to his wife, or he gives a get krisis to the wife. How do we know? He writes a get before he goes to the war. How do we know? The Sibit says, David HaMelech was told by his father Yishai. He says, and your brother, and your brother, who was standing there by Goliath, who was making this proclamation, and he gave them ultimatums. He says, go to your brothers, and your brothers tikul shon, bade them hello, and ves arbasam tikach, and take from them the arbasam. My ves arbasam. The things that they're between them and their wives take. In other words, each one wrote a get. Now, why did they write a get? So there's a big argument in Rashi. Rashi says they wrote a get of the condition that if the person dies, then you will be divorced. Traces jumps on that. If according to Rashi, they would have said, if I don't come back home, then she's worried about it'll be a laguna. Then they would, what do you call it? they would write a get. In other words, trying to save his wife from being in a gunna because the war is over and he doesn't come home after a certain amount of time. Then retrospectively, he is divorced, so she's no longer a gunna. Fine. But Rashi says, he says if I die, which is very different. And why? Because then it's clearly what you're trying to say is, I'm trying to spare you from a yavam. I have a brother, we have no children, and you're going to be humiliated, the whole thing of evil, so, or you don't want to go through the exercise. So therefore, I'm going to spare you, and I want to give you a get. So Taisa says, if so, the only people who wrote a get were people who had no children, and there's a brother involved. So what Taisa first says in Rashi, yes, that's the case. I never understood Taisa's Kasha and Rashi because it seems to me that the reason why Rashi says She'im Yamos is, of course, people went to war, wrote a get to make sure she doesn't remain Aguna. But the example we gave to David Melech, they were all standing there. We knew where they were. There's no case of Aguna here. They're all standing around the mountains and Goliath was down in the valley. And therefore, the only problem here is why would they have given the get then? The only reason why they were getting the get in that case, where we knew the soldiers were, so we could see whether they died or not. The only reason is Shema Yamos. Im Yamos, it should be retrospective. It's only for Yavam, and that's what Rashi's explaining. Rashi's explaining why David and Mel's brothers gave a get to their wife, and that's Takashim Yamas. But in a regular case of going to war, because of Aguna, of course, because of Aguna, we don't want Agunas. So I'm not sure how nobody says that, and that seems to be Pashut on Rashi. But anyway, Taisa disagrees with Rashi. Taisa learns it wasn't a conditional get. Because if Rashi's version is conditional get, the fact is that as long as the husband is alive, she's still a married woman. And Taisa brings it according to some Harikei, she's mamash a married woman, or definitely like a married woman. So the whole thing smells wrong. But the way Taisa learns is they actually gave an unconditional divorce. Because they gave an unconditional divorce, Shitaka was not a married woman. No Aveda happened whatsoever. And that's what the Gemara means in Shabbos, that David Mel didn't sin because each one of these women were totally divorced. And there's no problem there whatsoever. The only problem with Rabbein Tam's prat is, so why does David Melech, when he talks to them, say a suffix Ish? What kind of suffix? She's definitely not a married woman. So Taisa answers, which is very difficult to understand. Taisa says because they did it discreetly, no one knew. How can that be when the Gemara says Kol Hayyitzu, every single soldier? If every single soldier went, everybody knew that they gave a divorce. What do you mean? So, by saying that they did not mean that some soldiers did, some soldiers didn't, they kept it a secret. But the way our Gemara says is Kol Hayyitzu makes a Bein Tam Shat very difficult to understand. And that's why Rashi Shadl is better. And it's like a suffix Ish because we don't know whether he's going to he's not going to come back. If he doesn't come back, then it's retrospectively she was not a married woman. But till that happens, who knows? So both shatim are a little bit difficult to understand. According to Bein Tam, maybe when he said suffix he only meant appearance-wise. It wasn't really a suffix because they're totally divorced. But because it wasn't public knowledge that there was a divorce, it looked like an ish. Maybe that's what it means. Anyway, so therefore Donald didn't commit a sin whatsoever. Telling further, Tanya Rabbi Yosef says. In fact, I can support Rabbi Lozer. We learned in our mission here, when should a girl get married? On Wednesdays. Only on Wednesday, not on Thursdays. My time, why not on Thursdays? Because if she gets married on Thursday and he finds something wrong, he has until Monday. And we're worried that he's going to change his mind. Right? By then he'll accrue diet. My time, limit should be accrued diet. But by the time Monday comes along, he will calm down, he'll cool down. And the question is, so what's wrong with calms down? There's two possibilities. That one, that she committed adultery and she's also to him. Another one is that she has to lose the ksubah. So which one of these are we worried about? Are we worried about really that they're mutter to each other? And therefore it's not a problem if it's Thursday. The only problem is she forfeits her ksubah and he might give her ksubah if he waits till Monday. This is a proof Taisa says, not like Rashi that says that she does not forfeit ksubah. It says right here clearly she does forfeit ksubah. Rashi said this is only part of the discussion of the Gemara. It's not the conclusion. And that he's going to give her a ksubah that she's unwarranted, even though she's mutter to him. Who cares if he wants to give her a ksubah? It's his decision. It's his money. It's up to him. Obviously, nothing to do with ksubah. We're talking about what, whether that she is also to him or not. And Taisa learns she forfeits for sure. The question is, are they us to each other? He believes that this is what happened, and are they? Now, there's two possible things that he believes. Either there was the case of there's no dam, is that she wasn't an psula, or the pesa pesuach, which we'll work out in a second. With the koton taina, and what's the problem? He knows there's a problem there. But if we wait till Monday, he's not going to say anything, and he'll continue living with her. By then, he'll fall in love with her. He'll continue living with her, and there might be a problem of that's also to him. Now, which taina did he have? My love, the Katoyan Tainas Pesach B'Suach, that he's saying Pesach B'Suach. Now, why does he say my love? So L'chayri, what the Gemara means is a different way to learn it. L'chayri, what it means is also any Taina. Since the Mishnah doesn't articulate what the Taina is, it means it basically covers both Tainas. Whether he Taina is that I didn't find any Dam Psulim, or whether he Taina is that Pesach B'Suach. And perhaps even leaning towards Pesach B'Suach, because by Dam, they used to have, we learned before, they had this white linen. Where is it? We would have seen it, and we should have come to the bed and said, hey, there's a problem. We just took the white linen, there's no Dam there. She must have, there's a problem, there's an issue, and if she's an Ashes Kohen, we should have gone to the Bezin, not wait for the Chas to go to the Bezin. So therefore, in all likelihood, the Taina was Pesach B'Suach, so we have no idea. The only one who knows is him, and therefore that's the Taina we're talking about. So Gemara says, probably don't want Pesach B'Suach, and yet it says clearly that she should be usher to him, and that's why we don't want it to wait till Thursday, because then you have to wait till Monday. Isn't that clear, like Rabbi Lozo, that Pesach B'Suach is a valid Taina? Is a valid Taina. And Taisa learned that she forfeits Kesuvos. Rashi learned that the Gemara changed his mind and says, no, there's no question of Kesuvos. She doesn't forfeit at all. It's only a question of whether they live together. Said, well, no, the Katoyan Taina is dummy. We're talking about not Pesach B'Suach. Because Pesach B'Suach, we believe he doesn't know 100%. He could be making a mistake, could be making an error. Without Rabbi Lozo, we would have thought, people don't read what, it's a bacher, the first time he's married, he already knows what the Pesach B'Suach or not. He doesn't realize there wasn't, and therefore she didn't cry out or something. Maybe he doesn't realize it. And therefore, we're not going to take that word. Only Taina is dummy. And for whatever reason, didn't see that the white girl got lost. Didn't have a chance to look at it. So that's why Rabbi Lozo is a chiddush, even Pesach B'Suach. There's no raya from Abaya. Rabbi Shmuel comes along, Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Shmuel, and he says, he says that she's believed to lose the ksuva as well. But he says this claim, Pesach B'Suach, it's saying such veracity and with such confidence that she loses the ksuva. Now, why in the world does she lose the ksuva? She's obviously denying it. And we can never prove one way or another. Why should she forfeit a ksuva? Because we're going to introduce the concept as a chazaka here. The chazaka is that in those days, if you remember before we learned, it's a chassan who pays all the money for the wedding. We don't believe that a guy is going to spend a fortune on a wedding and the following morning he's going to divorce him. If you didn't like her, then don't get married in the first place. Why spend all this money on an event that tomorrow you're going to close up? So therefore, we say that he must be telling the truth. The chazaka that's supporting him. So even though Shmuel just said that you say Pesach B'Suach, he's believed that she loses the ksuba. He doesn't mention a word about whether they're allowed to live together. He holds that they're allowed to live together. And the chiddush is that not only he's not allowed to, not only forbidden to live together, but even regarding the ksuba, also he's believed. As far as which affects her, even as far as that's concerned, he's believed. Yeah. Does he more further? What's the chiddush that she loses the ksuba? Tanina, didn't we learn? Remember, we learned before that in Yehuda they used to encourage the chas and kala to actually have a rapport between each other, to get to know each other, because one of the reasons given is. The partial reason given is the decree we had in the Gimel and Beis where the Hegmon, the governor had a rule that every single girl, every young maid that gets married has to first have a relation one night with the Hegmon. And the problem is that if the girl, we had before about the prutzes, that if they had to do beratzen, they become also to the husband. So therefore the husband would endear himself on his kala. So they shouldn't do beratzen at all. They should only do by coercion. And therefore they mutter to the husband. So in Yehuda was encouraged that the chas and kala should have relations between the erisin and the nesuyin. So if somebody ate by his father-in-law in Yehuda, knows his closest wife, shalei be'edim, and there were no witnesses around or anything else, Einu yochel litvin, he cannot come along and claim later on, time psulim after they get married, there were no psulim. Of course, no psulim, because you probably had relations with her before the chuppah. Because they were together. So we say, Yehuda only in Yehuda they cannot claim it. Galil most of the time, and Galil with the chas and kala not with each other, and if he claims after they got married that it turned out to be that she wasn't a psula, it's a valid claim. He can nalamai. As far as we're concerned, what exactly is he claiming? Is he claiming that he did not live together, or is he claiming that she should forfeit psula? Ulamai. Ila Yisrael is as far as he's concerned. Look, I know I had no relations with her, and it must be for somebody else, so therefore she's us for me. If that's the case, then why should Yehuda be any different? But he's saying, remember we just learned, Shavia nafshe chaticha desura. A person has the right to say that for me, it's usher. We were talking about the Kesuvos, the Chakir, the Marit, and others, whether it's Neder or whether it's Nemonis. But the fact is the person has that right. So if he comes along and says that she's usher to me, how can we coerce him and say, no, you can live together even in Yehuda? He knows it as far as he's concerned. So therefore, what's the difference? Why not? Why wouldn't we believe in Yehuda? Obviously, he's talking about he wants to forfeit Kesuvos. In Yehuda, we don't believe you at all because all have a relationship with the Kalas. In Galil, we do believe you, and she loses the Kesuvos. So what is he clearly from here? That when he comes along and he makes a claim, she loses the Kesuvos. And then we go further. What exactly did he say? With the Kotoin Taina, and he's claiming a Taina. My lad, the Kotoin Taina Pesach. The Taina that he's claiming is Pesach Basuach. Again, like before, either the Gemara means also Pesach Basuach. He can claim either one since we don't delineate which Taina he's saying. Or because Pesach Basuach is actually more credible. Why is it more credible? Because when it comes to Tainas of Dam, how come what happened to the white sheet? How come they don't see it? To say that got lost is highly unlikely. So it's probably talking about a normal case of Pesach Basuach where we have no witnesses. We cannot corroborate his story or her story because she's denying it. We don't know what to say. So that's what's happening here. So it's clear ayah that Pesach Basuach makes her forfeit a Kesuvos. Says he won't know at all. Like no, the Kotoin Tainas Damim. So about a case where he's claiming Tainas Damim, not Pesach Basuach, because Pesach Basuach we say he cannot say 100%. As far as the Mishnah is concerned, he cannot say 100%. He knows for a fact. He thinks it's only a supposition. He doesn't know 100%, and therefore, and she says it's not true. So we would have thought that as far as the Mishnah is concerned, he's not believed, and that's the chiddush of Yehuda Mishmul, that he is believed. And why tak is he believed? Even to forfeit a Kesuvos, but she's denying it, and no one else knows. No one knows between us, only her and him. Why do we believe him? So Gemara will explain. Even we learned Avram Nachman Shmuel. Nachman said name Shmuel. Moshe Shimon Lazar Chachamim tiknu lehem lebnois Yisrael psula. Mosayin the Chachamim were massacred for Jewish girls. A psula $200. That's a Kesuvos. Big machlekes in the Shani where the psula is mahatoyda midrabanan. From the words of Reb Shimon ben Lazar, it seems Chachamim were masakin $200, which means that it's only a midrabanan Kesuvos. And there's a machlekes Tanoim. Faces, however, the long face at the top of the page says it's mahatoyda, and the best proof is look in our Kesuvos. In our Kesuvos, it says clearly, the $200 that is suitable to you midaraisa from the Torah. So how can we? I mean, we paskin that Kesuvos mahatoyda. Others say that Kesuvos is mahatoyda, but the Rabbanon are the ones who decided that's $200. And once the Rabbanon decided the amount, it becomes mahatoyda because the Torah says there has to be a dowry. There has to be some kind of alimony. How much? I'll leave it up to you. Like chalamoid, there has to be some kind of issue. It's up to you what's considered work, what's not considered work. Others say that it's taka totally midrabanan, and chizuk is only an expression. Doesn't really mean that. Anyway, others say that no, that's mahatoyda, but for almana it's midrabanan. And ulamana mana. In fact, we'll see the more later. Why is almana called a widow? Almana because of mana for the word $100. Behave, and it's all based on the told you where it says in the Torah, "Kimoyar hapsulis." You have to pay this girl when someone's introduced to her, "Kimoyar hapsulis," like a dowry of pasulis. And therefore, we say there must have been the Torah already entertains the idea that there must be a moyer, a dowry to the psulis. And some say the $200 also not Torah, and they say the word kimoyar is kama. How much? Reish kimoyar. The heim hemi nuhu, and they believed him. Sheimah Pesach was neman. So Rav Nachman also said name Shmuel, like Rabbi Yehuda said name Shmuel, that Pesach Basuah is believed and she forfeits a Kesuvos. Why? So the obvious question is the whole purpose of giving her a Kesuvos is, to Rabbanan said, to give her security that he shouldn't get angry and her women just throw it out because it's costing a lot of money. It's to give her security. But if you're saying that he can just come up with a story and say goodbye, then what's the point? True, Pesach Basuah was only allowed the first day, but already even that first day she's no longer secure. My Rava says, Rava, this is the key. Chazaka, we established a chazaka. Ein odem terech besuda umafsida. That a person will not work hard on a meal and spend all that money, and then turn around and say, you know what, I don't want to live with her. You wouldn't do that. Interesting, Gemara use expression terech rather than talk about the fact that he spent so much money, as if the tircha is even more difficult to accept, that a person is prepared to go through the bother and the hassle when he's not even interested. And we think that people will be less likely to do that than even spending all that money for something that is no interest whatsoever. So then, because you have a chazak, and then he turns around the next morning, it only works the next morning, and he says so and so, we believe it, because why else would he have done that? She has a chazak, he has a chazak. So we ask a question, but doesn't she have a migli? She could have said, yes, you're 100% right. I didn't have a Pesach Pesuach. Pesach was Pesuach. I didn't have any hymen. But she can say, Mukas Eitzani, I was riding a horse. I was doing aerobics. Something else happened that caused the hymen to disappear. As you know, there are cultures even today that don't allow girls to ride horses or to do any strenuous activity because they're going to lose their Pesach. But doesn't she have a migli? So if we learn, there's a Miga, which we'll learn more about this later on, actually starting the next year block. Miga is that if she's a liar, she could have said a better lie. So doesn't that prove that she's telling us the truth? There's a logic according to most opinions in the idea of Miga. So she has a Miga. She could have said, yes, you're 100% right. Pesa Pesua. But you know why? Not because I had an affair with anybody. It's purely because of Mukas Eitzani. And we'll see tomorrow later if she was a Mukas Eitz, whether he can say Mekatos. I was convinced you're a Psula, the whole thing was a mistake or not. We'll see later, the next few pages. But why does she have a Miga? So if you hold like those opinions that migui the Ramban Tesa brings maybe migui lahaitzi, when does a migui only work in the beginning? But we'll have on the first page. When does a migui work? Only if it's lahachzik, only if the migui is to support what is already there. But if using the logic of a migui to take money out from somebody, we have a rule: you have to bring a raya. Migui is not strong enough to extract money from somebody. Migui is merely strong enough to prove the money that's in my pocket probably belongs there and should remain there, but not lahaitzi. In this case here, the girl wants to use the migui, or the college use the migui to therefore extract money of the ksuva. Migui lahaitzi lo. Others want to say that a little bit like Beishamai, that a ksuva is not called haiti because a ksuva, as soon as you write it, it's as if it's hers already. So all it is migui lahachzik. But in the Gemara Babasa, that hey, we're going to have a whole discussion. What's stronger, a migui, a chazaka? So how come we don't use a proof from here that a migui is not stronger than a chazaka? And the reason is because, as Tesa lays out, there are different grades of chazaka, there are different grades of migui, and you can't just use one universal rule for everybody. Some chazakas established have much more logic to it than others. And this is a very strong chazaka. We don't believe for a minute that a person is going to spend all this money and time and effort to make a wedding, already thinking that he can't live with her, and the next morning I plan to divorce her. It's not going to happen. So